1997. Perhaps the most important year for the WWF. It was the year they started to fight back against WCW in the Monday Night War. But tucked behind all the stunners, nation rocks, and screw jobs was a little show that was testing all the boundaries first, and showcasing talents that otherwise would have been wasting away in catering. Let's take a look back at my favorite B show, Shotgun Saturday Night. Now, a lot of folks have discussed the early episodes of the show. Like Wrestling Bios did a whole video about it that you should definitely check out. Cultaholic also looked at it, so that's out there too. But I actually want to take a look at the history of the show past that original incarnation, because there's a lot of good stuff that seems to be overlooked. In late 1996, Vince McMahon once again got the idea in his head that the WWF needed a grittier show, in smaller venues, that would air live every week. This was the same idea that would launch Monday Night Raw. I have to say, Vince gets this idea a lot. He was constantly trying to create his version of what was happening on the indies. He'd kind of tried a third time with Raw Underground emulating GCW's Bloodsport. This show would be vastly different than what Raw had become. Instead of the big and big-ish arenas they were running at the time, this show would emanate from New York's hottest clubs. It would be live on Saturday night. Anything could happen. And it would be called Shotgun Saturday Night, and it would cost $10. That's right. According to Dave Meltzer and Wade Keller at the time, WWF were looking to air weekly Saturday night pay-per-views at the low price of $9.95. Ultimately, it was decided this wasn't the best idea, and the new show would air instead on syndication. Shotgun aired its first episode in syndication in 16 markets, live or on 1 hour delay, on January 4th, 1997, from New York City's Mirage nightclub. To just kind of glaze over the episode a bit, Vince was on commentary with Sonny doing color commentary, Ahmed Johnson gave D'Lo the Pearl River plunge on the hood of a car, and Marlena flashed the Sultan while Bob Backlund lost his mind. That was the good stuff. Overall though, the show wasn't great. The matches were lackluster and the show looked terrible, but they knew what they had to improve on. Over the next several weeks they'd come from brighter lit venues like Penn Station, such a great night spot. They'd feature bigger names like that Penn Station episode had Undertaker vs Triple H, where Taker tombstone Hunter onto and down an escalator. And it had more entertaining non-match segments like Terry Funk's pipe bomb and his brawl with Steve Austin at Denim and Diamonds in San Antonio. The first 6 weeks was an absolute fever dream of a wrestling show, and could have been even more insane had Vince Russo's ideas made it to the screen.
Shotgun Saturday Night Ideas. The Shotgun Tough Guy match. There is one Shotgun Tough Guy who holds the Shotgun Tough Guy title. Instead of title belt, he's got a badge. Why not let the last match be a time limit match with a clock in the arena, and the crowd could count down the waning seconds of the match and the show. The match starts with a shotgun blast and ends with one. Here's another match stipulation. 2 minutes with Jake the Snake. If you can't beat Jake in 2 minutes, you have to leave the WWF. Instead of wrestling Jake the Snake, Jake could be like a roving reporter and always has his snake around his neck. It would be pretty cool to see a guy hanging out in a bar or whatever with a snake.
Yeah, this is definitely Russo.
6 weeks was also all the time it took for WWF to realize that a live or live-to-tape show from New York City almost every week was not a great idea. It required them to pull guys off the weekend house show loops, sometimes doing so at the last minute. Maybe it'd have been worth the hassle if WWF were getting paid by USA or someone else to air it. We've seen WWE air worse shows because they're getting paid. I'm looking at you, NXT Season 2, but they weren't. So to accommodate the touring schedule and make sure talents weren't being shifted like crazy, WWF moved Shotgun to being taped prior to Raw on Monday and aired that weekend. In this era is when I truly became a fan of Shotgun. To understand my love for this era of the show, it's important to note that I didn't have cable at the time. We wouldn't get cable until WrestleMania 2000. So at 10 and 11 years old, every Saturday night I tried to stay up through SNL until 1 a.m. when Shotgun came on in my area. This was how I got to follow the WWF, so this was my favorite show. And I always had a long play VHS in the VCR recording, just in case I couldn't make it. While many view this period of Shotgun as just another B show, if you actually watch it, there's a lot of really fun and interesting stuff on the show. For instance, it was a huge platform for the WWF's ill-fated light heavyweight division. Stars like Mr. Aguirre, Brian Christopher, Abismo Negro, Scott Taylor, and the centerpiece Taka Michinoku all appearing almost weekly in 1997. It also featured the likes of Tajiri and Super Crazy before their ECW and WWE stardom. And in 1998, we'd see Christopher Daniels pop up. Shotgun allowed the Mexican Minis to be presented as unique athletes and not children. RVD had some appearances while temporarily aligned with Jerry Lawler, and Flash Funk had some really fun matches on the show. But who really ruled the roost of Shotgun were tag teams and stables. The Headbangers and New Blackjacks were heavily featured. Furnace and LaFawn, while not having the kinds of matches they'd had in All Japan, were still showing off a pretty decent amount of what they could do. I thought they were awesome, still do. And can we take a second to talk about these captions on the nameplates? Some of them are actually kind of funny, even if most of them are groan-inducing. It was still different than what they and WCW were doing. It wasn't a game changer, but still a clever addition to the show to help it stand out a bit. Kinda reminds me a bit of what AEW does with their nameplates, mostly for Adam Page. The Godwins vs. Legion of Doom feud started when LOD broke Henry's neck on Shotgun Saturday night. Owen and Bulldog were also on Shotgun quite a lot and even had a few tag title defenses on the show. Speaking of Owen and Bulldog, the 1997 stables, the start of gang warfare. Shotgun episodes were filled with the likes of the Nation of Domination, and later on Savio and Crush's groups would become staples of the show as well. The Truth Commission. Both led by the Commandant and the Jackal, they were all over the show seemingly every week. And then there was the Hart Foundation. The summer of '97, they were an absolute fixture of the program. Jim Neidhart having singles matches, Owen and Bulldog having tag and singles matches, recapping Brett's promos, and of course, Brian Pillman on commentary. Pillman would join the commentary desk at the request of Jim Ross as he was worried about Pillman and his addiction issues. The Loose Cannon started in March, not too long after the change in format. I mentioned in my video about Pillman how perfect he was for Shotgun. If they still wanted the show to feel like it was for a more mature late-night audience, Pillman was the right choice next to JR. He constantly praised the Hart Foundation, rail against whoever the babyface was that was standing up to them that week. You never knew what he would say or what he would do. On one episode in June, while in his never-ending feud with Steve Austin, Pillman became annoyed with a fan sitting ringside wearing an Austin 316 shirt. Brian complained the entire first half of the episode until finally he snapped. He pulled the fan over the guardrail and started stabbing him in the face with a pencil. I was shocked as a 10-year-old. I'd never seen something like that before. Sure, the fan was actually a plant, probably someone from the WWF crew or a local worker, but at the time I had no idea. And just the spot itself, that violent on a fan, hadn't been done before in the WWF. Truly, now anything could happen in the World Wrestling Federation. Pillman would be kayfabe fired from commentary for the attack. This was of course a way to write Pillman out of the role so he could return to in-ring action after rehabbing his injured ankle. He'd be replaced by Jim Cornette. The JR Cornette pairing, while being considered too southern by Vince, was one that I really enjoyed. As 1997 rolled on and WWF was able to be a bit more wild on Raw, they toned down Shotgun until it was just another show with decent matches. Through the end of 1997 until the show ended in August of '99, it would more or less feature just one or two decent matches and more recaps. By that point, SmackDown and Sunday Night Heat had replaced Shotgun as the additional show where storylines and characters progressed. In syndication, the show was replaced by WWF Metal or Jacked, depending on the market. Also may have been replaced by Afterburn? Maybe that was later, I don't know. Those shows had so many different names. Either way, none were close to being as relevant or entertaining as Shotgun was in 1997, even after the first 6 weeks. It was a hell of a run. I highly doubt we'll ever see Shotgun Saturday Night pop up on the network, but a man can dream, can't he? Were you a fan of Shotgun Saturday Night? I want to know your favorite moment. Or is there a different B show that holds a special place in your heart? Let me know in the comments. I'm Scott from Retrospective. Thanks for watching.